and Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.
Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where we are in the world, to this edition of The Lawyer's Den. On behalf of the international broadcast media, I want to welcome my good friend once he has a chance, because we have an exciting discussion tonight. It's money and the law. Money, law. At least you're not paying lawyers tonight. So, Nick, where are you?
I'm here, Bill. I've arrived. I'd like to tell everybody, welcome to The Lawyer's Den, where we discuss exciting topics and legal issues. And I think we have a great topic that we're going to do today. It's right up my alley. I have a lot of discussion points about that. But should we bring in our other panelists for today's show?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Well, actually, Nick, we do have to make a special announcement.
What is it?
For our audience. I don't want people to be disappointed or think that we are censoring Adam. Adam is currently prepping his team to be champions in moot court. So,
right.
Adam.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So Adam was kicked off. We had a tremendous argument the last couple of days. I'll translate for Bill. Nobody here likes him, so he's not going to be here today. But in the meantime, we do have some people that we agree with, and they're the ones who are going to show up today. And first of all, hailing from New York City, who's an attorney practicing in the Big Banana, the real street fighter, we're going to bring in Fernando Leal, that street fighter from New York. Got to have a real attorney on this show, otherwise, where does this show go without a New Yorker? You know,
it goes nowhere. What's going on, Nick? What's going on, Bill?
It's going nowhere. Well, we got some exciting topics today, and we like to listen to the opinion of the street fighter. But we have other people that are going to be joining our panel today, and this person actually went to BYU Law School, also received an LLM. He is a practicing attorney in the great state of Utah and Washington. Let's bring in Jeff Teichert. Jeff, welcome to the show. Okay. All right, we're doing good here, but we have old crass. And with the Lawyer's Den, we have to have a little touch of class. And we do have one, hailing from the University of Denver School of Law. No, it's not you, Bill. I'm saying class, so just hold off, buddy. Okay, class from the University of Denver School of Law from Lithuania, and then received her master's in at the University of Denver. Let's bring in Guidry. Guidry, welcome to the show. There we go. Gotta have the class.
I will tell you one thing. I am going to be very excited today, and it's not Federal Reserve topic, although it's very, very exciting. But my sister went into labor just 3 hours ago, so I'm all over the place.
Wow. Okay. So see, that's a big one. It's not as it's not like what we do here. But let's move on to the Den Master, who is an attorney, who's a practicing attorney, I believe, in the Washington, D.C. area. We're going to bring the Den Master in, who tries to keep the Lion's Den, the Lawyer's Den under control. Bill Trezevant, the floor is going to be yours.
Well, let me just begin with this. On the one hand, there is nothing. No, thank you. But there is nothing more important than family. And Guidry, that trumps just about anything else that the rest of us may even think is important. So, big. That's right. I heart. So, this is how I think we'd like to start today. First, I'd like to say welcome, Nick. Thank you. Fernando, welcome. Thank you. Jeff, thank you. And Guidry, tonight we're starting with money issues. We're going to start with life, law, and money. And the floor is yours. Please.
As a woman who sometimes likes to shop, I'm very willing to talk about the money. But prior to dive into the money issue, I think it's very important to touch on the Federal Reserve as the institution. what is this complicated hybrid of public and private institution that is really in charge of taking care of the money, printing the money, issuing bonds, and also setting the interest rate. And, just really quickly to mention, the Federal Reserve was incorporated and introduced in the American fabric 1 year before the First World War, and it remained active, and it remained the decentralized central banking institution in the United States, despite several constitutional issues that actually caused a lot of fights of the titans. As to this day, we are talking about how do we have the Federal Reserve institution that is in charge of the economy of the United States when there is still questions about its legitimacy, particularly to the delegation of powers, because the Article 1st of the Constitution specifically says that Congress is in charge with coining the money and also setting its value. So how this private-public institution that is primarily governed by the individuals, corporations, and banks, not appointed by the government, still has such a power. And there we go to the second issue of the Constitution when it's appointment power. To this day, we know that the principal officers of the Federal Reserve, and you're not going to believe it, are not appointed by the president, but in fact are being appointed within inside. And it goes contrary to the appointment power, which says that principal officers need to be appointed by the president with a consent of Senate. So here we go. And the third issue would be the removability, which also makes it very difficult to remove them. We have to have a good cause. And put it all together in a little popcorn ball for us today to enjoy. Why it is so relevant? It is because we have a new administration. And new administration has a taste to spend more money, which is normal. So right now we have on the table $1.9 trillion relief package that might really overheat the economy. So I'm very looking forward to dive into it with you, gentlemen.
I guess I just have this one thing, and Nick, I have to come to you on this one because I want to put all this into context, and that is simply this. Nick, can you describe for our audience the size of the American economy? I think it's north of what, 18 trillion?
No, it's bigger than that. The U.S. economy is the largest economy in the world. Over 23 trillion GDP is part of the U.S. economy right now. It keeps moving up closer to $30 trillion. So we actually do have a very large economy, and the Federal Reserve, like Guidry said, gotta bring Guidry because she was correct, is actually an interesting institution. It's not a private and it's not a public institution. We were very fortunate. We actually interviewed members of the Federal Reserve several years ago in Chicago. So they opened up the Federal Reserve to us to conduct interviews. Doug Tillett was the vice president of the Federal Reserve. He was very kind. They shut down the Money Museum so we could conduct interviews. And here's what we found out. And most people don't ever get to talk to the people that are actually working in the Federal Reserve. It's almost like this mystery banker. Okay, they're not mystery bankers. For the most part, Bill, they're the people that sit on the board of governors. A lot of them are just businessmen. They're businessmen in companies that are fairly nice size corporations, and their concern is, and then they have economists, some really sharp economists. In this case, we met with several PhDs from the University of Chicago, and their goal was to keep the economy of the United States afloat. Their mission was to make sure that unemployment was extremely low, inflation was under control, and so they actually had some very noble goals, and they seem like some extremely nice and wonderful people. But they have really, there's a press out there that just really, because what you don't understand, you kill. Okay, they just kill the Federal Reserve because frankly they don't understand it. So since they don't understand it, it's got to be this evil group of people running around trying to do things to manipulate people on this planet. But I didn't see that to be the case, Counselor.
Well, it just seems to me though, Guidry, it is complex and what they're doing. And it seems that just questions I may have that I'm sure maybe our audience has as well. Really, how does the Federal Reserve affect our lives every day? And then Guidry, if I can get that from you, and then I got to get to Fernando and Jeff. But Guidry, please, because it's an important subject, and it's people's money, their checks, you know?
Well, just quickly to respond to Nick's point, yes, we do not know a lot about Federal Reserve. However, we know, as Nick mentioned, very rightfully so, that it is made of banks such as JP Morgan, Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and we have seen what has been happening during the financial crisis. It all comes to play. And that also goes to answer your question, Bill, that when we talk about 2007, financial crash, as early as 1991, there were indications about overheating, about the financial bubble, and yet nothing was done because there is an assumption that there was an agenda amongst those banks and people who are in power or inability to actually make certain changes, and it was still hushed and nothing was done up to the point where we got, and the result was very visible. So it does affect our daily lives. It's just one of the examples as where we come, how we deal with it.
Bill, you got to turn on your mic. There you go.
Do you have any thoughts so far? Because then I got to get to Jeff and then Beckett. I see you, buddy. Hang in there. Fernando.
Bill.
Yes.
I did not hear anything you had to say because you were muted.
Well, I'm not.
You want to know if you had any thoughts about the Federal Reserve? I'll translate for Bill.
There you go. Thank you. My lip reading skills are very poor.
Yeah. That's what you want to know.
Yeah, it's not an area that I know that much about. You brought up a point, Nick, that we don't know who they are. Actually, I have a friend who does work for the Federal Reserve Bank here in New York City. For the branch that's here in New York City. It's been his first job out of college, or actually after he got his master's from Columbia. And I've asked him, I've grown to understand that there's 11 different branches to the Federal Reserve. Those of us commoners like us, the first thing we think of is interest rates. I also think of bank audits because my mom used to work for a bank, Manufacturers Hanover's Trust, which doesn't exist anymore. It's merged into JP Morgan Chase. And they also pay the country's debts. They also pay out all the, all the stuff that we buy, all the bills that come in. It's a monolith. Our first national bank actually started in 1791. And Guidry brought up a point as to where in the Constitution do you get the authority for that? And there was an argument between Jefferson and Hamilton that it comes from the necessary and proper clause. And Hamilton won out the argument and got Washington to sign the first laws to establish our national bank, which was more of a loose conglomeration. Then you scroll forward to where we are now with first the meeting that happened on Jekyll Island with Morgan Chase and the owner of Citibank, which used to be National Bank. And that was the Aldrich Plan, which served as the basis for the Federal Reserve law that was passed in 1913, I believe. That was the Aldrich Plan was 1910. Congress rejected it, but they used it as a format.
Okay. I love it. Jeff?
Yep, mic problem.
Unmute.
This is shaping up to be interesting, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm about to agree with Guidry for the second night in a row, which has got to be some sort of a new precedent. She's correct. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and a foreign coin. So where in the Constitution is there authority for a national bank, particularly to manipulate the currency and try to plan the economy by manipulating the money supply? That is unconstitutional, and it is blatantly contrary to the power which is given to Congress. Now, it has been argued that Congress has delegated that power to the Federal Reserve, and I would contend that that's a non-delegable power. And as Guidry also said, they've delegated it to an independent quasi-public regulatory agency, which again is not authorized under the Constitution. On the economic side, Nick is right. Our economy is very large. I think I checked it earlier today. The entire value of the U.S. economy is $24 trillion. Our national debt is $28 trillion. So we are massively over leveraged. Now, here's what the Federal Reserve does. Or at least what they've been doing. They've been artificially holding interest rates down, and that artificially expands the money supply, the supply side of money. It makes it too cheap and encourages malinvestment, and it creates financial bubbles. You look at what happened in the great financial crisis, and the same thing is beginning to happen again. A starter home here in Utah for a young couple in their 20s is $300,000. Mm-hmm. What couple in their 20s can really afford a $300,000 home? Maybe if they're buying at 2% interest or something like that. But we know that that is setting us up for what we had in 2007, 2008. And because we're valuing money improperly, in order to, artificially juice the economy on paper. And so the policy is inherently inflationary, and people say, well, we don't have inflation. That depends on how you're looking at things. If you're looking at the consumer price index, maybe not. Look at the price of housing, and it's blowing up like crazy. So I think the Federal Reserve, this is, I don't want to use the word socialism too recklessly, but what we thought we learned from the Cold War is that planned economies don't work. And what we've got with the Federal Reserve and what we had with the National Bank was an attempt to create a planned economy because they thought that would be better than allowing market forces to regulate.
Okay, Jeff.
I disagree with that, and I think we ought to phase it out.
Okay, Jeff. Beckett, professor, please.
Well, let's do a proper introduction so everybody knows who Beckett Cantley is,
yes.
as they would say. Okay, from UCal Berkeley, and then he received his law degree from Southwestern University, his master's in law from the University of Florida. He went on to teach at the John Marshall School of Law. Let's certainly want to welcome our esteemed professor, Beckett Cantley. Welcome to the show, Professor Cantley. You're now a subject matter expert on the Federal Reserve, so
Okay.
Bill will give you the questions.
Okay. Go ahead. Fire away, Bill.
No, actually, I was hoping you might add some guidance because
okay.
Clearly,
Just throw the Federal Reserve. Okay.
Yes.
I'll tell you the thing. We got a good history already while I've been on, and the constitutional issues I think are been flushed out. My biggest issues, I have several with them. One is that the Democrats have started funding agencies and programs through the Federal Reserve, like the Consumer Protection Agency, when they knew that Congress could tie up the funds after the Obama years. They put Elizabeth Warren in charge of it, and as initially, and they decided to fund it through the Federal Reserve so that you couldn't tighten the reins later. Now, it didn't work out that way, but that was the attempt. There's where in the heck you think you can just remove the Congress's power of the purse by shot putting it over the Federal Reserve is way beyond my idea of what's constitutional. But that's what they've done, and they've done it. I know they've proposed, if not done it, with other programs since then. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember which one, but a couple of the major stuff that was was put in place during the Obama years. And I'll bet you anything the Biden administration with, both houses of Congress tries to do the same thing again. That's probably my biggest, irk about them. They make a spiff on every dollar that we borrow. Every dollar bill is a it's a note. It's not an actual, it's not really currency.
No, but Professor, seriously, after 4 years of Republicans doing whatever they wanted with their money, our money, really, now after 4 weeks with Biden, you're going to say all of a sudden Democrats are running amok? Is that
no?
Really?
They ran amok during the Obama years with this on this specific topic. Okay, and my guess is that Biden's going to do the same thing.
No, didn't they run amok with George?
But how do you take away Congress's power of the purse by shot putting it to be funded by the Federal Reserve? I would love to hear what Jeff has to say about that one.
Well, I think Jeff sits in your camp, the camp of the camp of the Federal Reserve has too much power. But
that's an extra level of unconstitutional.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's Congress it was up to Congress, and they delegated this out to basically a private public industry. There's two cases that recently came before the United States Supreme Court. One is your friend Bloomberg, who actually sued. And Bloomberg is a Democrat. He sued the Federal Reserve. He's a good friend of yours, I know, Beckett, because under the Freedom of Information Act, he wanted to basically he wanted to get the information from the Federal Reserve, mainly as to what banks were receiving loans during the crisis in 2008. It went to the United States Supreme Court, who we're all aware of, and they said, yes, he's entitled to that information. Of course, they had to go up and down all the appellate courts to reach that decision. But it just shows that and the reason why is the Federal Reserve is basically a private institution for many purposes. And then there was another case that recently, as of a couple days ago, went before the United States Supreme Court as whether or not they're treated as a private corporation for patents, and they ruled that they were. But it's Congress that delegates to the Federal Reserve this enormous power and, frankly, responsibility for keeping the economy sound. Unfortunately, and I don't think this is the Federal Reserve's fault. I think it's more the party's fault. When I say parties, notice it's plural. It's the fiscal irresponsibility of the Democrats and the Republicans when it comes to the purse. And that's the reason where we saw this debt, and I think that Jeff pointed out, our national debt is 28 trillion, our GDP is 23 trillion. How did that happen? It wasn't Obama's fault. Come on. Trump ran up the debt, and it wasn't. I know. But what I'm saying, Beckett, it was George W. Bush. It was Obama. It was Trump. In other words, they have tremendous bipartisan support of fiscal irresponsibility in Washington, D.C., and nobody holds these people accountable except us, the voters, and we're out to lunch on issues like this.
I agree 100%, Bill.
Well, whoa, I got Beckett to agree with me. Wow.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what, Beckett? I'll tell you what, we'll move you up here. You could sit next to me now that you agree with me. If anyone disagrees, they get cut off the show. Like Adam's not here today.
Okay, Deidre, do you have any thoughts? Because this entire discussion was inspired by your thoughts. So please, I don't want to. Do you have any thoughts?
I always have some thoughts, but no, I'm enjoying the discussion, and I have to agree with discussion as well. I do have an issue with the delegation of power, and the fact that it spills over to the point even appointment of the officers who handle these matters and make decisions. And of course, I also agree with Nick with what has said. We have to protect the institution and economy from the certain political party or the leader to be able to manipulate it, as it would be possible for a new president to come and manipulate drastically, let's say, the interest rate or to that extent. So it is a complicated issue. However, it's getting a little bit out of control. And I think the fact is that we really do not know how to start talking about it and how to deal with it, because it's almost like you really don't know what's happening inside and what kind of decisions and policy decisions are being made by private bankers, by the very successful CEOs, by retired bankers, and also by the personnel or institutions that represent the public interest, such as different manufacturers and farmers. So the idea of it is really good. However, what happens when all of those governors and all of those institutions come together, I think it's still unknown to us to the point that it should be known.
Yeah, and Bill, I want to bring up a big national threat that's not brought up very often. Now, one national threat we all hear about is, of course, they invade our computers and we have the Russian hackers. But here's the other national threat. Oh, wait, that's a poker chip. Sorry, here it is. It's called a Bitcoin. I don't know if you guys seen this. Right now, these things are valued at $50,000. It's cryptocurrency, manufactured not by the United States, but manufactured by Yahoo somewhere else around the world. This has already been deemed illegal in the country of Nepal. However, the United States and the Federal Reserve eventually going to have to deal with cryptocurrencies. And same with the United States Supreme Court. Since when are we allowed to print our own currency? In other words, saying, okay, we're going to just bypass the Federal Reserve, bypass all the monetary systems and fiscal responsibility systems, the tax system, Beckett. Okay, I decide, well, I'm just going to pay with my little Bitcoin. So the thing is, people can't catch me. I can evade taxes. I can print more currency. How is the Federal Reserve going to deal with this, Mr. Tresvant? Put you on the spot, Bill.
Well, actually, I'm not sure that it's the Federal Reserve's job to step into the private marketplace. I mean, I tend to think that Guidry's right, that there is an issue about who can do what and where and under what the Constitution could say. But I'm more interested in hearing what Jeff and or Fernando might have to say about this.
Yeah, okay, Jeff, what do you say about Bitcoin, baby? Bitcoin taking over. You got to turn your mic on. Your mic.
Exchange Commission, for the benefit of our audience, is looking very hard at the cryptocurrencies right now, and I think what you're seeing is the SEC is stepping into that space and beginning to regulate cryptocurrencies as securities, as stock. Now, how is that different from a Ponzi scheme where you make more and more money depending on how many more people buy it? It's going to be interesting to see how that evolves. I know that there's a lot of people looking into it that think these cryptocurrencies aren't actually money. You can't pay a judgment with them in a lawsuit. There's a lot of things they can't do. So that's going to be interesting. Now, to pick up on a point that's been made, at least indirectly, by a couple of our panelists, the reason that Andrew Jackson vetoed the National Bank, and one of the reasons that Jefferson was against it, is they were both philosophically opposed to concentrations of power, public and private. And the Federal Reserve is essentially a national bank that has been granted monopoly power by the Congress. And that's that's not a great idea. I think it was John Huntsman who was running for president in 2012 and said, "Too big to fail is not capitalism," and I think he was right. Jackson, in his veto message, said, "Is there no danger to our liberty and independence in a bank that in its nature has so little to bind it to our country?" How is the Federal Reserve different from that? The Federal Reserve is a massive concentration of power. I want to make another little point, and I'll throw this out to the panel, but everybody told us after the 2008 financial crisis or during it, that the sky was falling, that the economy was going to collapse if we didn't jump in with a massive bailout of the 8 large Wall Street investment banks. Is that true? Well, it would have been a huge deal to the people at the top of our financial system. It would have been huge for them. But what would have really happened? Those institutions would have gone through bankruptcy. those assets that they held, those loans, would have been sold off to the highest bidder for what they were actually worth, which was pennies on the dollar. And it would have been a huge decentralization of our financial system. Local and regional banks would have bought up those assets, and they would have had the room to renegotiate a lot of those home loans. And I think that would have been a healthy thing. It would have restored competition among financial institutions instead of trusting one big oversoul on top to get everything right.
Yeah.
Boy, can I respond to this?
No,
I would have allowed them to fail.
Yeah,
Okay, he is so wrong, Bill. Okay, I mean the thing is, Jeff is so wrong on this point. We already looked at this a long time ago, and I'll go to AIGFP, which was basically a harbinger of the financial crisis. It was a little company over in London, which was part of American International Group, who basically was giving derivatives out. They call them derivatives, but basically said, well, if your funds collapse, we're going to guarantee these funds for life. Okay, and they did this with all the major insurance companies in the United States. All of them. They bought these derivatives from AIGFP. It's like $0.25 point. Now, here's what would happen if we didn't have that $700 billion bailout. AIG would go bankrupt. And then what would happen next? That principal couldn't pay the claim. They go bankrupt. Then what happens next? One America goes bankrupt. In other words, you have this cascading because each bankruptcy creates a bankruptcy of another company all the way down the line, and you would end up with the Great Recession that George W. Bush, a Republican who didn't know what he was doing, put us into. So what happened, the Obama administration, like them or not, did the right thing by doing the bailout. In many cases, these were loans that were already paid back now to keep the American economy solvent. If you had it the other way, what Jeff is suggesting, we would all be picking potatoes in the farmlands of Utah, which frankly, I don't want to do and spend time in the dust bowls of Utah.
Nick,
I have no interest in that whatsoever.
I hear that. Nick, Jeff, I hear both of that. But can I ask you a simple question?
Sure.
Do we really care? Because that was 12 years ago.
Yeah, of course we care, dude. Okay.
Hold on, because we're past that.
No, we're not. What planet are you living on?
I'll tell you, I'm trying to live on planet Earth right now.
Okay, we still have some serious problems relating to that.
Well, no, I can't fight over who was right or wrong in a comic book 12 years ago.
12 years ago and too long ago. Hey, 12 years ago. Come on, Bill. 12 years ago, we got guys like Jeff and Fernando and Adam talking about things that happened in the 1700s, because of the Constitution. If you think 12 years ago is bad, then you should take the Constitution and burn it. That's like a 200, 300-year-old document. Who cares what happens 2 or 3? This is 12 years ago. Hey, a lot of people are here on this panel were alive 12 years ago.
Because, I mean, is Nick right or
of course I am.
Misguided?
Yes,
Bill, what the bailout that Nick just defended was a reinflation of the bubble, and that's why you got newlyweds that are 23 years old paying $300,000 for a house. Now, Andrew Jackson said, "Gentlemen, I have had men watching you for a long time, and I am convinced that you have used the funds of the bank to speculate in the breadstuffs of the country. When you won, you divided the profits among you, and when you lost, you charged it to the bank."
Okay,
and that's
exactly we really have to hear from Andrew Jackson.
Hold on, Nick, Jeff, this is what I'm talking about.
I don't want to hear Andrew Jackson.
12 years ago was ridiculous. I wanted to hear from
That's what happened 12 years ago. It just was history repeating itself.
Jackson. What do I care about Bush? Can I hear from you?
I think I will have to agree with Nick wholeheartedly on this one. I think that Obama's bailout, that $800 billion bailout, was very needed. It was well needed to prevent the inflation that we were afraid of. And in fact, right now, there's pretty solid argument against such a limited bailout, criticizing Obama's administration that had he provided a little bit higher, reasonably higher bailout, we would not be feeling such a long spillover effect as we did in this particular case. So we would never know. We don't have the ball that would show us what would have happened. But I do agree with Nick. I think it was absolutely needed. Right now, however, we are looking at $1.9 trillion bailout. And that's, I think, a little bit different topic. And what scares me right now, I will go straight to your question. A lot of people analyzing the overheating of economy that they are scared of, or the inflation that is going to happen, are using the Obama's administration bailout of $800 billion, saying that, well, when that was happening, everyone was afraid of inflation and what could happen, the long-term effects, and nothing had happened. We recovered quickly. So now they're using the same analogy, saying that, well, using 1.9 trillion to bail out the economy will also not create such inflation and will not overheat the economy. Here, I'm a little bit cautious, and I'm anticipating to see what's going to happen.
But Bill, can I respond to Andrew Jackson? Okay, I'm really sick of Andrew Jackson, and let me tell you why. He should never be quoted anywhere. We should take all the books and quotes he has and just burn them. First of all, but besides it being 200 years ago, here's what he did when he was president of the United States. They made a deal with the American natives that they could have these settled lands. Then he uniformly just revoked the deal, grabbed the natives American, took them across the Trail of Tears, had a lot of them die, and the Supreme Court ruled it to be illegal. And you know what he told the Supreme Court? Oh, you made your decision. Now enforce it. Go ahead, Jeff. Tell me he didn't say that. He said you made your decision.
I'm telling you, it's completely irrelevant to what we're talking about.
Okay, it is relevant because you're quoting a guy. You're quoting a guy who does pulls garbage like that. Please don't bring this garbage to the den.
Nick, I hear you. Beckett, please. I need
your
to come in at this point, please. And Fernando, I'm coming to you, but Beckett, please.
Yeah. Please what?
Well, okay, well, you have everything
between Jeff and Nick on Andrew Jackson?
Well, no. Over.
You have to mediate the dispute, Beckett, between me and Jeff on Andrew Jackson. He says it's irrelevant. I say it goes to intent and character of the man that he quotes like he's gospel. And what he should do is bury him, all his papers, all his work, all his history, because that's the man who he is. He violates the Supreme Court. He should have never been president. He's a jerk from Kentucky. Why do we quote him? Please don't quote him.
No, Beckett, I was going to ask you simply this, that Guidry brought up the right point, which is, as we discussed, the $1.9 trillion proposal in Congress, and she is cautious about whether or not that is 800 million was too low, 1.9 may be too high. Is that inflationary? And so much so that it will cost our economy in the long term. That's what I'd like you to talk about. I mean, Jackson can be left to, Nick and Jeff.
Okay. I'll leave Jackson alone.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends. The thing is, the Obama bailout, didn't just go in, didn't go just to fund states and their budget deficits and whatnot, which a decent portion of what this initial money looks like it's going to go to. We're basically just sending federal money down to pay for the idiocy of California and Illinois and other states. And I don't think that there's a need for all that money here. I think I'm with Bill. I mean, I'm with Nick that in 2008, while I agree with Jeff, there a reset, if you could have managed it, would have been excellent. It just wouldn't have happened that way. Nick's right. I mean, you would have had the widows and orphans argument going on because all the insurance companies would have gone down. Yeah. And then the investment banks go down, and then basically the backbone of the economy is gone. I mean, you would have turned this into have the economy or something within 5 years. But this is not the same situation today. I mean, that's not where we are right now. So I do think it will be somewhat inflationary, but I think what's really a problem is that's just the tip of the iceberg of the trillions that we're about to see spent. So I think that we're going to, wow, look at our size of our economy versus our debt. Well, it's about to really, really grow over the next 2 years. And that will be inflationary. In fact, my clients are asking for us to put together something that would, that would provide them some downside cushion for their lines of credit and the inflation that's, for interest rates going up and the inflation that will invariably make their costs soar. So I think this is the beginning of a real problem. And I don't think the money is going where it should.
Okay, Fernando, from your point of view, in New York City, how does it look? Because here's, I guess, the essential argument. We've heard from Beth, okay? But then on the other side, there are real people that are suffering every day. Now, I don't know if it's guns or butter, which is the traditional economic argument. But when somebody says, hey, listen, they need a relief check, does that have, is that a waste of money? Is that important? Is it overstepping the bounds? Is it too much? Is it beyond what the president or Congress can do? Fernando.
That's a hard one because it all depends on who's asking for the relief check. I know of situations where people have received relief checks where they should never have received them. The how and the why, I don't have an answer for that, but I know they received it where there are individuals that should have gotten them and didn't. I have friends who are solo practitioners who depended on, they had what was called a per diem practice, which means that they would go to other solos and they would pick up all their court appearances, and that's how they generated income. When the courts shut down completely, and they've been shut down now for almost a year, where there aren't any in-person appearances, they aren't generating any income. A lot of those people only received unemployment. For them to get the relief check, they had to go through hell and high water. Some of them got it, some of them didn't. Yet I know some major firms who apply for PPE loans and other things, they got it automatically. We can all speculate why, because they have a large book of business with a bank. They have an in, whereas my solo friend did not.
Yeah. I mean,
it's hard.
That's absolutely true. I mean, we got PPP loans because we had long-term relationship with banks, and we had a long-term established corporation that had not just a relationship with the banks, but also money going in, money going out. They could keep records. They know what we were doing. Joe Blow by himself gets slaughtered. And one thing I did see that was good about this, the first stimulus package, it went to everybody. At least they give everybody a check from the bottom up, and that's what they really needed to do, and that's what they really need to do on this one. But when you look at that, it was only a $360 billion to give everybody that extra 1,400. How did you ratchet up to 1.9 trillion? Okay, what Beckett is saying, there is so much pork in that, there's so much garbage in that it's not funny, and the Congress goes, well, we'll just put it to the credit card. And sooner or later, there's going to be a call on that credit card, and that's the problem that we're seeing.
No, I got that part. Deidre, please, what are your thoughts on this one? You've heard, I think, some of the discussions. What are your thoughts? I'm curious.
I completely agree with everything that was said. I agree with Nick, with Fernando, with Beck. I think we have to plan it better. Unemployment benefit is also troubling. Being here in Florida, I have multiple friends, small business owners who cannot convince the previous employees to come back to work at a, let's say, a retail store or tuxedo store, because those people are getting a large unemployment benefit. So you also don't want to blame them, because everyone is scared what's going to happen in the future, but it's not all right, it's not okay, and it adds up. So I think there is a bigger problem of trying to figure it out, and just having one blame solution, one label on that, it's not going to help.
Yeah, and Bill, the thing is, as I said, Occam's razor simplest is best, right? Okay, the simple solution to the problem is what they did before: send individuals checks. But government doesn't like to do that. They want to create this huge bureaucracy, huge amount of rules, bring in all the lawyers, micromanage poor people to the nth degree, spend a lot of money administering the program as opposed to getting the program done. And that's the thing I really object to your friends in Washington, D.C.,
No,
where
no,
you
no,
live,
no,
Bill,
no,
is
listen.
that you guys create so much bureaucracy, so much mess when you could solve it with a simple problem. But instead, you've got to create zillions of rules and huge amounts of bureaucracy, and you got to feed on all these bureaucrats just to get a guy a $10 check. Come on, Bill.
No, Nick.
Change the culture up there, buddy.
No,
Go
no,
knock on some doors.
Actually, Nick, I think you're wrong, and quite frankly, I think you're just misinforming our audience, and I'll tell you why. When you talk about all this over $1,400, or whether it was $600,
just give
or whether it was
$1,400.
$1,200, so just give me a chance, Nick, please, to make my argument, if that's okay with you. What about the $14 billion they just gave to the airline industry on top of the $20 billion that they gave to the airline industry to save jobs? What about all the other corporate welfare? Nick, you were here front and center saying that the little guy, Joe, got slaughtered. So it was Joe Slaughter that got slaughtered with all the PPE while all your clients made out because they had all the connections, they had all the bankers. Great. So they made out. And now you are advocating for a position that says that when somebody says, hey, listen, let's do $1,400, then you're like, oh, it's all mismanaged. Oh, it's all ridiculous. Oh, it's a boondoggle. Meanwhile, the same Congress, Nick, is passing and budgeting for over $14 billion for the airline industry, $20 billion for this industry, $10 billion for that one, $15 billion for that one, and the little guy, Joe, gets slaughtered. So Joe Slaughter can't even get $600 because you accused the government of malfeasance. And that is crazy, Nick, as a fundamental answer. But don't mind me.
The government of malfeasance. You're the government of unbelievable malfeasance. We can start off just with the numbers that Jeff said. Look at your national debt. Look at your GDP. You're already way upside down, dude, in Washington, D.C. Okay, so you need to go get these people in Washington, D.C. to get a grip, which they never will because they're drinking that Potomac River fever. And so what they do is they continue to set up their programs, their rules, their bureaucracy to solve a problem that could be simply solved by doing direct payments. But no, we don't want to do that. And I've seen that also in the PPP loans that we've received. Unbelievable amount of bureaucracy. Unbelievable about administration just to get a loan. It wasn't even worth taking the loan. We're going to just send all the money back so we don't have to deal with you guys in Washington, D.C.
No, Nick. No, Nick. You know what is so privileged about the statement that you just made?
What?
You're like, hey, listen, the government gave me money, and
they're going to give they loan money.
No, Nick. The government gave me money, and they gave me a hard time about me taking the money. Meanwhile, there are people that never even got the money. And so it seems to me that, I'm just scratching my head on this one.
Well, that's just part of your ineptness that exists in Washington, D.C. So, the thing is, I'm just calling the way it is, Bill. The people in Washington, D.C. are just incompetent.
I want to hear from around the rest of the world. I've got Miami and Guidry. I got New York City and Fernando, and I got Utah and Jeff. So, Guidry, please, we're going to start with you. Fernando, we're coming to you. And Jeff, we're coming to you. And Beckett, I need you just to kind of put some sense to it. Okay.
So we're talking about the relief package, or are we talking about Federal Reserve, or are we talking about
No, we're talking about whatever you want to talk about. Because remember, we did free speech last night, so you have free speech.
I love free speech. No, I will agree with Nick, and I also agree with you, Bill. I think agreeing with Nick, I think the relief efforts were definitely mismanaged. I think the human cost is insurmountable. We definitely could have done it better. We waited too long. Both parties manipulated it. It's ugly political game, and now we're dealing with the consequences. So it is upsetting what happened and how it happened. Some good things were made there, but also some bad things were made there. Again, reality. When it comes to Federal Reserve, and the future and the current Biden's administration, I am still optimistic. I still like my projection would be I do not think that we're going to have 1.9 trillion relief package. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. I still think that the inflation might come. I do not think that it's going to be an economic boom or bust. I am hopeful that actually the economy and people are going to manage it. And again, the second time, we're going to avoid it. More to come.
Okay, Fernando and then Jeff, please. Fernando?
Everybody's talking about what sounds like boom bust cycles in our economy, right? They've happened since forever because we have a capitalist economy. And if you think about through history, what causes the boom and then the bust is that the boom is generated by the new invention, the new whatever it is. At one point, it was manufacturing that led to air conditionings, microwaves, so on and so forth. We hit a wall because there was just nothing more to manufacture, nothing new was created or invented, and we hit a down cycle in the 70s, right? 80s come along, we start going up. Why? Because now you get Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley's looking like it's come to an end. So now we're coming to somewhat of a halt, no matter what you do. What's the next big thing that's out there? I don't know what it is. Maybe it's Bitcoin, which the SEC is starting to regulate. Maybe it's all the medical tech that's coming out, because there is a whole area of medical tech that is on the verge, be it insulin pumps, be it vaccines, be it whatever it is. I don't know what it is. I know it's out there. And it's coming, and that's probably going to be the next thing that generates our economy. As term of the debt of the government, my limited knowledge is most governments run on debt because they don't create anything. There isn't a widget that they sell that generates income, right? So at the end of the day, they're always going to run on debt. They have always run on debt, going all the way back to the Roman Empire when they were sucking the gold out of your pocket with the tax man going door to door. I don't have an issue with the national bank. I don't have an issue with bailouts. So the sky is going to fall right now because I agree with Nick on a lot of what he has said. That may not ever happen again. So stay tuned, because who knows when these things are going to happen. Bailouts. Reagan did a bailout for the car industry. If General Motors and Ford collapses, think of the rippling effect that has, not just on the auto workers that are unemployed, but the guys that actually make the parts for your car, the guys that are at the stamping factories, because the actual factory that we think of that makes the car, that's an assembly plant. They take parts from all over and they put your car together. That's where my dad worked for 35 years on an assembly line. And they pay those back. I don't have that big of a problem with the Federal Reserve as Jeff does. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. The Constitution is silent as to a national bank. So Congress at some point was going to delegate some of his power, because you're not going to get 200 plus representatives and 50 senators to figure out what the hell to do. So they were going to delegate it and create some sort of national bank. And that's what's happened. Now, has it gotten too big? Probably needs to be scaled back.
Fernando, please, if I can. Jeff?
You can.
No. Fernando, I think just gave you the magic words, which is that the government creates nothing. They generate no wealth. It's completely useless. And as an opening line, Jeff, your thoughts?
Hold on, because you misrepresented me. Wait a minute, Jeff. It's not totally useless, because the government's job is to protect interest. So don't misquote me like you always do. I know you Washington people love to do that, but that's not what I said.
In New Yorker, you're going to have to excuse our esteemed colleague from Washington, because they do things like that all the time. Let's listen to.
Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
I won't speak for Fernando on this issue, because I'm going to take the point further than he probably would be willing to. But Steve Jobs got extremely wealthy, giving us stuff that we wanted. And that is capitalism. It's where you bring something to the table that people want and you sell it. And the more people you serve, the more money you get. And that's the American way. The problem with our system is, think about when Eisenhower warned people about undue influence, sought or unsought, in the military-industrial complex. He wasn't talking about some big conspiracy theory. He was saying that having a permanent defense industry is going to give certain moneyed interests great influence with federal officials, because they've got huge incentives to line congressmen's pockets to make sure they get the right defense contracts. And when the government starts picking winners and losers, the economy gets distorted. And the government is paying people to make the widgets that politicians want, not that the consumer wants. And Eisenhower was right. We couldn't resort to emergency improvisation in a modern world where warfare moves faster. So that was something we needed to do, but he was warning against the power of those entrenched interests. Now, I'm going to suggest that the 2008 bailouts were exactly that. They were keeping the people that were already in power in power. Now, I know you guys are going to tell everybody that the sky was falling, that the insurance industry would have failed, and all these other, it would have been this cascading set of dominoes. I'm not so sure. I am sure of one thing. The debt is over 28 trillion now, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news to our viewers. We're already in trouble. We already can't pay the interest. And you know what the government is doing? The Fed is doing this. It's a fancy phrase called quantitative easing. You know what that means? It's a fancy way of saying we print money because we don't have it. We print money to pay interest on the debt. And you know what that gives us? Runaway inflation. And that's why you got 23-year-old couples that can't afford to buy a house for less than 300 grand.
No. And I hear you, Jeff, and I do appreciate that. I want to do this really quickly. Deidre, I need to hear from you if you don't mind. And Beckett, I need to hear from you, because I don't know how much more I can hear of, the poverty status of 20-year-olds with a $300,000 home. When I was 20, I didn't even own a car. So, I can't even figure out how to own a house for $300,000. So, Deidre and then Beckett. Deidre?
Well, I'm going to take it back, circle back to the government, going back to 1791, when Fernando was mentioned, when Mr. Hamilton proposed this hybrid of public and private bank, first bank in the United States. What happened when the bank was open to the public? The government bond, the national shares, the security was purchased, the purchase price was $25. Within hours, the price exceeded $300. Then what happened? When usually happens when gravity gets involved, it went back to $125. Mr. Hamilton saved the market from being crashed by using our national government's money, buying the government security. So my point is that government will exist. There's going to be a movement up and down, but I'm definitely thinking that we're not going to have an economic bust. And it is what's happening. Money is deflating. Prices are rising. We just have to deal with it. Young couples have to buy apartments instead of houses, and we are just living. That's it.
Beckett, please.
Okay, so I just have a little bit of time here. I'm going to wrap it up by saying, I don't think this $1.7 trillion bailout on its own is going to cause hyperinflation. I think it's just the beginning of a tidal wave of spending, though, and that will in fact cause a great deal of inflation. We're already seeing inflation in areas like food, and I think you're going to see it creep up in a lot of other areas, housing, of course, as well. And we're going to see it in a lot of other areas. But I think it's going to take a couple of years before you see it. And by then we will have spent many trillions more. That's my prediction.
Okay, well then, listen, I know we're running out of time, and so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to my friend Nick, who may or may not agree with me on any given day, actually moment by moment. So, Nick, do you want to go around the horn, or you just want to close this program?
We're past an hour, so I'd like to close it up because I'd like to go check your watch, man. Hours goes by pretty fast here on the Lawyer's Den. So I'd like to thank our audience for listening to the Lawyer's Den, our special on the Federal Reserve and the economy. Stay tuned for future programs, and we will see you next time. And Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.